Hello, everyone. Today is Saturday, April the 5th, 2025. Um, I'm recording kind of early in the morning, so I'm trying to keep my voice down. Hopefully, it comes across okay on the recording. Um, hopefully, I don't want to speak too loudly to disturb my neighbors. This is kind of a bummer. Just as a heads up, getting into it, it's not the most cheery video, but it goes with the topic matter, I suppose, because what's the current astrology we're dealing with right now? We have Mercury retrograde, conjunct Venus retrograde, conjunct Saturn in Pisces, and Mercury is about to station direct in a couple days from now. And at the same time, we have Mars in Cancer, Mars at 25 Cancer, Venus and Saturn at 25, Mercury at 26, Pisces. So there's a trine between this Pisces stellium and Mars and Cancer. And then if you look at Uranus and Taurus, that's at 24. So we've got this trine between Mars and the Pisces planets. And then in the middle of that trine, there's Uranus sextiling. In my last video, I talked about Neptune sextile to Pluto, and a lot of what I was talking about was how at the point of time when Neptune made its ingress, I noticed my little dog Daisy, who we had been treating with insulin for diabetes for the last 6 months, was blind, and unfortunately, well, I don't know, it is what it is. We had to put her down yesterday. For me, it was weird because it was basically I just made this video. I made this astrology video talking about her, and then it just felt like right after making that we had to put her down. And I was basically, it was one of these things where with astrology, I think there's a certain attitude of stoicism or whatever, where you can look at the transits and you can see that, like, oh, okay, so if this house represents my pets, represents my dogs, and my dog is getting old, and then I see Neptune move in there, and I'm fairly new at astrology, but when in my own personal history, it was just funny timing for all this stuff, because if you think about the Neptune cycle, Neptune went into Pisces around 2012. My family adopted this dog while I was away in Australia in 2010, so it's a little bit earlier before Neptune in Aries, but more or less this dog's life just lasted the whole Neptune in Pisces, and then when it was strange how just on the dot it was, and also the fact that if you use sun signs, this dog had Sun in Virgo, and this big stellium of the Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, conjunct Saturn, it would all be opposing the dog's sun sign. I'm not really that into doing like that in-depth canine astrology charts, but I basically, with the combination of the Neptune into Aries being my 6th house and all this stuff opposing what would have been my dog's sun sign, I could see that, okay, we have this old dog that we're going to need to let go of soon. I did not expect it to literally be like, I don't know when it was that I recorded my last video, not that long ago, right? But there's also, I'm also thinking it's not just Neptune into Aries, but maybe also this whole dynamic, Saturn being old age, being the Senex, and Uranus being this sort of sudden changes, sudden disruptions. There's also, you look at, I don't know, there's a lot going on in politics right now and current events, and I'm obviously a bit distracted by, this is kind of funny because I'm kind of realizing, there's this Carl Jung, when he's talking about the I Ching, when he's talking about synchronicity and stuff like that, was saying that from the perspective of synchronicity, it's like the acausal connection is like it's not about things that are causing each other to happen, but it's as if certain things have a tendency to happen together, right? Or like there's a certain resonance that, like, when one thing is happening, then other things happen along with it. Um, but it was also, it's a bummer right now because, I mean, obviously what happened with the stock market's in the dumps. The capitalism is just taking a beating right now from the trade war or whatever. I'm not much of a capitalist myself, but it's a situation where everything feels like it's falling apart, and then to have my little dog die in the middle of it, I feel like I'm having this reaction that I don't know. I'm not gonna spend too long in this video because I feel like I'm probably still grieving since it was only yesterday we put the dog down. But I was prepared. I was preparing myself for this for a while because I could see the dog's health was deteriorating. But there's sort of like the thing is, it's not for those. I don't know how closely people are following this, but for me, it what's going on in my life. It wasn't just the dog. It was that my mom had to put down her horse just in the same month, and we also got the news that my uncle died. So it's like my uncle, my mom's horse, and one of my dogs, all. And there's something funny about, I don't know. I don't know if funny is the right word. I guess it just tends to happen this way, or it seems to be. It seems to go with this idea that things are changing. Like we're in the midst of a big change, and there's all this stuff with the thing about my dog. What I'm trying, there's something about it very specifically. I was considering making, maybe I could just make a memorial video for my dog and talk a little bit about my dog, right? But there was I put it on my non-astrology channel or something. But there was a with my dad's dog. My dad got the dog while I was in Australia, and it was odd because my dad made a big, when I was in Australia, they had to put down the family dog while I was away for a whole year, so I never experienced the passing of the dog we had before. And then when I got back, there was a whole new dog that they got without me, and but apparently part of this whole process came from, like, my dad really did not do well with the dog grief, and he was actually hesitant to getting more pets because he didn't want to go through the emotions of dogs dying. And then, but it was just interesting because then it was my dad who died like only a few years later after he bought this dog, and it was like, so this is kind of thing that this dog. My dad was a chiropractor. He used to keep this dog at his office and stuff like that, and this dog, it's not, for me, it's not just that the dog passed away, but the dog is a kind of a symbol for my dad, and it was sort of a link back to that life before my dad passed away, when my dad was working as a chiropractor. And there's this whole kind of like, there's also this whole kind of thing where, like, the way my life is, regardless of that stuff, is that things were very different before I went away to Australia. And so there's this big kind of like, there's sense of a big chapter of my life that was defined. It was also this thing that it's like, there's so many things that are like, I don't know. It's like, I ended up, when I got back from Australia, I had a bunch of mental health problems that timed up with the Neptune into Pisces ingress. And so there's something about how, to me, it just really makes sense that in my own, I don't know, again, it's not about causing things, but using the planet Neptune to time things and these big changes that happen with Neptune in different signs. It made sense to look at it from that perspective. But I'm talking a little about Neptune. I wanted to do this more about the other planets, right? Um, there's something about, but I mean, regardless, there's something, I think that it does actually work with this, because I've noticed that when planets are in Neptune, there's this desire to do things quickly, and I kind of felt that, maybe my dog we could have held out longer, that maybe my dog was okay, but my dog I took her for the last walk that I was ever going to take her on, and when we got back, she was just extremely disoriented, and it was like I already mentioned that she was blind, but it was like her blindness had just stepped it up a notch to where she had trouble walking straight, and she was just acting kind of erratically, and it was I don't know. My mom started becoming concerned that maybe we should look it up. Like one of the things that my dog started doing was walking around compulsively in circles, and apparently this is a form of dog dementia or kind of neurological condition. And we basically just determined that she wasn't going to be getting better. She's 14 years old, an old dog. She's only going to be getting worse, and the humane thing to do would be to put her down rather than stretch it out, longer than it needed to be. So I don't think we did anything wrong or whatever. We were doing the responsible thing, right? But there's still there's this also. I mean, it also could go with this fact that when it happened, the moon was in Cancer, squaring Sun in Aries. With this Mars, it's kind of the thing that Mars in Cancer is like the separating, cutting kind of dynamic, but it's in there's a place where it's very sentimental. So there's a lot of like you're letting go of something that there's a lot of sentimental attachment to, and then with Uranus, there's the idea that like maybe it came a bit unexpectedly, or maybe it came a bit suddenly, maybe it was a bit of a shock, right? But there's this kind of like there is this sense of like for me, there's a lot of emotion or whatever. There's a lot of like I felt there's something of this dog for looking after this dog wasn't just about having a little dog to look after. It was like it was my dad's dog, and there's something about like this dog was a link to my dead father, basically, right? And that there's something about how if I've been doing like I did a lot of therapy last year, but there's a certain conflict that I get when it comes to like doing therapy, in that I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna try to. I'm not. There's certain things that I'll talk to a therapist about that I don't feel like talking about publicly, and something that I'm putting out for the public. But it seems to me that there's a lot of pressure to, to separate from your family or whatever, right? To be completely independent and individual and all this kind of stuff. And just based on the situation that I'm in, like I feel like I have some kind of responsibility for my family, or that there's the thing is like it's a strange thing about the lack of connection in our culture, where if I did find a way to, I don't know, if I just found my own place to rent or something like that, or I don't know, like there's this whole kind of thing where it's like the ideal of being an independent adult is basically to make yourself be as not bounded to any particular community or family or culture or anything like that. You're just supposed to be a person who is basically is functional enough to make enough money to support themselves, and then the more that you're supporting yourself is bound up with a bunch of other people, the more you are just weak and dependent and all this kind of stuff. And even I would think progressive therapists, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to give my therapist a hard time, but there doesn't, even people who I expect to be progressive seem to still fall back into this thing where they're not telling me what to do, but the whole structure of what's going on seems to just emphasize I'd be better off if I wasn't, with my family. But at the same time, I just found this thing like I couldn't, I guess at least I've crossed this one hurdle at least, where it's like I just had it in my head that like I'd feel bad about leaving my old mom with all her pets that are all aging, and that she's not, I don't know, like that I feel like some kind of responsibility to my family to stay here and look after my aging mother and these aging pets and all this kind of stuff. And I just like in the same way that when I went away to Australia for a year, Like I had my grandpa die, I had my dog die, I had all this stuff happened while I wasn't here to help or to help deal with it. And then I just kind of feel like if I was just to like my family, I don't know, like I feel some responsibility to stay here and help to like take care of all this. But I also, there's an inherent kind of like, there's this kind of like boomer millennial dynamic where as a millennial, I feel like I don't have much agency in my own life because so much of my situation is, I mean, I suppose I could, if I was really had the intention to, I could just, you know, individuate or whatever. I don't even know if the word individuate is the right word for this, right? But I feel like I need to, you know, it's like you stay here in your hometown with your home family during a time of like economic chaos and disorder to provide a bit of support and a bit of security or something like that, or else I just throw myself out into the vast unknown where I don't have any connection to anyone, and nobody has any fundamental like kinship connection, right? Like nobody's gonna like be like, oh, no, it's all just about like my ability to survive, right? Like, can I pay rent? Can I be functional? How much, you know, how productive can I be, right? There's nobody's going to support me just because I'm their brother or their family member or their friend or their community member. It's just like, you just have to like cut all these sentimental ties and make yourself as functional of an adult as possible. And it's just kind of like, it just seems like the most like, it's just cold to me, right? Or it's just sort of like, it's just kind of like, and this is like, if I adopt that, then I'm like a healed like adult that has like been through therapy and I released all my but it's like, I don't know. I feel like at least there with this whole dynamic, there's like the sense of like overcoming at least one of these hurdles or at least one of these things that I feel like I have some responsibility to take care of, and it's like not just the dog itself, but as a symbol to like this whole whatever, my family's whole business, my family's whole, I don't know, the family karma, you would say, right? And so it's like on top of this, I mean, this is also just one pet among many. My mom has always been a pet lover who loves animals and has lots of animals to take care of. And we have 2 cats and we have 1 other dog. And this is also the weird thing is that, so the other dog survived, that, you know, it's like, I always just think of them as 2 dogs together. And so now it's like, I don't know. Maybe I also just wonder, like, if I project my own human psychology onto the pets too much, because like but I don't know, it's like it's to me it's just be weird because I always just think about these 2 dogs together and now it's just the 1 dog. But I've already been in the habit of like, because the older dog's health was just so much more of a concern than the other dogs, that I have to like, 1 dog could go for much longer walks than the other one, right? So I had to start taking these dogs out separately because the old dog just couldn't keep up with the younger one, and it was just kind of starting to get to be like a bit of a handful, right? So I think there's something about how, I mean, I was talking a lot about Neptune earlier, but you can also extend this to all these other dynamics with the Saturn, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, and Saturn being all this stuff about, it's kind of a bummer. It has to do with old age. It has to do with getting sick. It has to do with being old. And the Uranus, the sudden kind of being freed from that kind of karma. But then there's also, I don't know. There's all this stuff to do with politics. And I think one of the things about I don't know. I guess it's fair for me to talk about the election we're having in Canada and the trade war and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, actually, well, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, for me, I feel like there's so many people like I'm Ukrainian. I have Ukrainian heritage, right? And it's like, you know, I can only imagine what if you're living through these wars and you have to deal with that the grief of war all the time. And I'm just, you know, this starts to just made me feel like I'm just spoiled Westerner who's just sad about my dog or something, right? But I mean, I guess I don't know, maybe maybe we're not, people aren't all that different, but we're just, there's something about, I don't know. I think it's obviously, I don't want to also get caught in the trap of apologizing for my privilege, but I actually went to the Ukraine once, and it's just very odd about how, how privileged we are here versus how terrible it is in some of these more impoverished, war-struck countries. And that, like I mentioned before, even the kind of dogs that I have, you would see them just running around on the street. It's like a whole different culture over there. They don't have the same animal control. They don't have, there's a lot of stuff that we have that we seem to take for granted that comes from us being in such a, the Western civilization, or whatever you would say, North America, right? And I also have, like, some of my ancestry is apparently from, like, there's this country called Belarus, which isn't even a country. It's like, but there's all these places. If you look at a map of Europe, the borders change all the time, right? Over history with all the wars and stuff, and it's only in this post World War II era, due to basically the advent of nuclear war, and that the whole paradigm of warfare has changed. But it's like there are a whole bunch of people that could identify as a certain culture, as a certain nationality, but you have you just become swallowed up by, like, Poland, or by, you know what I'm saying, or like as the borders change, you're like, you imagine if the official country or the official government is just like some country that you don't even identify. You're like, I don't know, I'm not Polish, I'm from Belarus, right? Or it's just kind of funny or just the sense that, like, I don't know, I had there's this other dynamic which I also realized that I don't really even know what it means, but that when it comes to the having all these animals, there's this whole yin and yang kind of quality with dominant and submissive, and the two dogs really got along together, partly because the dog that died was clearly the more dominant one, and the one that survived was clearly the more submissive one. And then, as I was just sort of grieving this whole process, one of the things that I realized was that now that instead of having two dogs, two cats, we only have one dog and two cats, but the surviving dog is the submissive one, and it's like having the oldest animal who is also the most alpha, sort of most dominant animal in our little animal pack. It's like there's a certain kind of balance of animal power in our house, and it's like the one that is most dominant passes away the first. It's like there's like an animal power, but the thing is that it's already getting like this, because when you're the most dominant animal, but then you get to be completely blind, and you get to start becoming an old blind, you're not that dominant anymore, right? So there's something about, I don't know if that is it's like, it kind of seems like in our politics is kind of run by kind of crazy, blind, old. The most dominant is also the most blind and crazy, or something like that, right? And that, I don't know. I mean, I see some of the other astrologers suggesting there may be things to come in the future around, questionable leadership choices and stuff like that. But I just feel like, I don't know, I just kind of feel like we don't. I mean, I don't want to say that we're spoiled and we ought to be more like these war-torn countries, but rather it's like there's a certain kind of privilege that we have as Canadians that is just kind of bizarre if you have something to compare it to, right? Where I think that a lot of that's what politics is, right? Politics is not just an idea that everybody's on an even playing field, because geopolitics isn't even. There's this kind of thing that, like, there's a certain political dynamic that's inescapable when you are America's next door neighbor. You can't just decide to be like, oh, well, this is inconvenient that we live right next door to the USA, and they've just decided to go in this direction, right? Like, wouldn't it be much more convenient if we were like on the other side of the world and we could just trade with some other next door neighbor? No, we don't actually have any other next door neighbors to trade with. We don't, like, like, we have to send, if we're going to trade with other people, we're going to have to send boats out, all, with all, but we can, with USA, we just trade across the border. There's a geopolitical thing that positions us here, and then if that creates this sort of sense of privilege that comes from, that we're not in, we don't have Russia as a neighbor. Well, I mean, I don't know. We've got, I guess we have Alaska as a buffer between us and Russia, but I don't know. It is what it is. I don't know. But it's just, I just feel, I don't know. I feel like I'm recording this because seems like it makes more sense to not be stuck just bottling up. I'm not even as moaning as much as maybe I thought I would be, but that I'm at least letting my creative flow keep going with this. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to get too much into it now, but I find it's also interesting if you consider that both of the Canadian prime ministers, or both of the people running for the election here in Canada, have a Virgo moon, and then Elon Musk also has a Virgo moon, and Carny has Pisces Virgo axis stuff going on. He's got Sun in Pisces, Moon in Virgo, and I don't know. Like, I don't want to. I keep having this thing about, like, I don't know. I'm trying to be an objective here about. I personally would prefer if Carney won rather than the other guy, but I don't know, with this Mercury's about to station direct in Pisces, conjunct this Venus retrograde, conjunct this Saturn in Pisces, conjunct the North Node in Pisces, and there could be some kind of a shakeup or something like that in the election, I imagine, because so many people, the election seems to have so much to do with this Virgo Pisces axis. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. Thanks for watching. Sorry, I don't know. It is what I guess it is what it is. I'm sorry I don't have more happy news for you. I'm grieving the loss of my little dog, who just reminds me of my dead father, who I'm also, like, for me, it's just this big sort of, the big ball of family karma is slowly starting to unravel. So, like, the origami is starting to unfold, bit by bit, and I'm just giving you a report of it. Thanks for watching.